And let's bring in Amy Spitalnik, and she's a former colleague of DA Alvin Bragg during his time as New York State's Chief Deputy Attorney General. Catherine Christian and Charles Coleman are still with us, two lawyers who, of course, both been prosecutors in the past. Catherine, thank you very much. Amy, let's talk about Alvin Bragg. Talk to me about why you think he brought this case after first deciding not to. That's become an issue, certainly in the opening statement today. And what kind of a prosecutor is he? What can you tell us about him, about the man that we don't know, who's in charge of the first trial of a former president in American history?
Oh, look, Alvin is a lifelong prosecutor who has over and over again brought cases rooted in the very same themes and issues that are on display here. And so while this might be a case against a former president, and certainly a high-profile one at that, it's very much aligned with the sorts of cases he's brought throughout his career, including when, in fact, we worked in the Attorney General's office together. Alvin Bragg, Matthew Colangelo, who's also one of the lead prosecutors on this case on behalf of the DA's office, gave the fantastic opening statement today, directly oversaw the case that our office brought against the Trump Foundation, rooted in many of the same themes, the ways in which Donald Trump over and over and over again exploited and broke the law in order to further his own interests, his own political interests, his personal interests, his business interests. And so this case is actually very much rooted in the same themes that we've seen Trump held accountable successfully accountable for by Alvin Bragg, by Matthew Colangelo, and by a number of different prosecutors over the last few years.
And we just saw Donald Trump getting into his SUV, and he'll be heading back, we presume, to Trump Tower. But he is free from the courtroom now. We don't know how much contact he'll have with his lawyers as the day and the evening goes. But I'm wondering, since you know Alvin Bragg, obviously you have heard all the attacks against him, both verbally and on social media. The New York Times put his decision to pursue this case, and we've talked about the fact it was considered a zombie case. It was looked at and died and looked at and died and keeps coming back to life. Here's what the New York Times wrote. He, meaning Alvin Bragg, is betting his career and his legacy on a prosecution he inherited, rejected, and then transformed. What would his level of confidence have to be for him to bring this case, not any case that involves record keeping or trying to divert attention, but trying to divert attention, obviously, from for a presidential election? What would the level of confidence have to be, knowing him?
Look, knowing DA Bragg, there is no way he would have brought this case unless the facts were strong and he were following those facts wherever they led, which in this case was to a strong prosecution of Donald Trump. And so I know there's a long history here, and there's a long history in the DA's office when it comes to prosecution, investigation and prosecution of Trump. But Alvin is among the most level-headed people I've ever worked with, and he brings that level-headedness to every single thing he does, including every single case he prosecuted, whether it was in the Southern District, whether it was in the the AG's office, and certainly now in the DA's office. So he's not someone who would ever bring a case unless the facts were there, and he's certainly not someone who is motivated by politics. He is motivated by the rule of law, by a commitment to the facts.
Would he typically be in court on the first day like he was today?
Look, it's important that he is in court because this is certainly a crucial case. And so I saw some of the tweets and the color from the courtroom of Alvin sitting there with his accordion file on his lap. And that certainly tracks with the sort of meticulous approach he's taken to every case I've seen him work on, being committed to putting his head down, doing the work, drowning out the noise. And certainly there's a huge amount of noise being thrown at him, whether it's from the former president or from a number of others who are using smears and attacks, including, frankly, racist, bigoted, anti-Semitic attacks going after Alvin, using tropes like George Soros to distract from the facts of this case and to try to drown out the actual details and accountability that Trump is facing.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.